31 Aspects of the True Origin of the Jewish People and Their History, and the Question of Their Wealth. Despite the deeply rooted biblical narrative claiming their descent from the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and their exodus led by Moses, many archaeologists and historians consider these accounts to be more in the realm of mythology, primarily serving as a source of identity. There is even some skepticism regarding the reigns of Saul, David, and Solomon. However, there are verifiable pieces of evidence suggesting the existence of Israelite kingdoms dating back to at least the 8th century BC. Additionally, two key episodes of the Jewish diaspora are widely recognized. The first was instigated by the Assyrians, while the second involved the Babylonian exile during the time of Nebuchadnezzar. Subsequently, with the rise of Christianity, Jews faced persecution and expulsion, particularly in Christian Europe. Toward the end of the 19th century, a new strain of anti-Semitism emerged, which was rooted more in racial prejudices than religious differences. This culminated in the tragic Holocaust. So, how did the Jewish people truly come into being, and what are the pivotal events that have shaped their history? Why do they tend to be associated with prosperity? In this video, we will provide answers to these compelling questions about the Jewish people, who are also referred to as Israelites and Hebrews. But before we dive into these topics, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate notifications to stay updated on our content. Number 1. The origin of the Jewish people according to the Bible. According to the Hebrew Bible, the Jewish lineage traces back to the patriarch Abraham, his son Isaac, and Jacob, the son of Isaac. On the side of the matriarchs, they come from Sarah, Abraham's wife, Rebekah, Isaac's wife, and Leah and Rachel, Jacob's wives. The 12 tribes, as narrated in the Bible, are described as being established by Jacob's 12 sons. The narrative unfolds as Jacob and his family migrated to Egypt, where they endured enslavement under the rule of the pharaohs. Their liberation came through the Exodus, guided by Moses. Following this, the Israelites, under the leadership of Joshua, secured Canaan. They then transitioned through the era of the biblical judges and entered into a period of monarchy. The first three kings in this phase were Saul, David, and Solomon. However, the united monarchy eventually divided into two separate entities, the Kingdom of Israel and the Kingdom of Judah. Number 2. The origin of the Jewish people according to archaeology and history. In the context of modern archaeology and historical analysis, the version of Jewish origin presented in the Hebrew Bible is, for the most part, considered a mythological account. It is seen as a means of shaping identity and providing inspiration for the Israelites, rather than a precise historical record. According to these academic disciplines, the emergence of the Israelites and their culture is viewed as a religious choice, first monolatristic and then monotheistic, and not as a product of patriarchal figures, the Exodus, or military campaigns in Canaan, as described in the Hebrew Bible. Instead, it is argued that the growth of a religious belief centered on Yahweh, coupled with distinctive cultic practices, gradually molded the Israelites into a unique ethnic group separate from the other Canaanite societies. Number 3. A genetic heritage dating back 4,000 years. The emergence of the Israelites as a historical entity is documented between 1200 and 1000 BC. An essential artifact, the Merneptah stele, from ancient Egypt, dating to 1220 BC, contains the word Israel, making it the oldest known written reference to the existence of the Jewish people. While debates persist about the existence of the period of the biblical judges and whether a united monarchy ever truly existed, historians generally agree that there was an Israelite kingdom around 900 BC, followed by a Judean kingdom about 200 years later. Genetic evidence also indicates that Jewish people share a common genetic heritage dating back 4 millennia. Number 4. The Jewish diaspora. The term, Jewish diaspora, refers to the dispersion of the early Israelites and the later Jewish community from their ancestral lands in the Near East to various communities worldwide. In a contemporary sense, it describes the Jewish communities residing outside the present-day state of Israel. According to the Hebrew Bible, the initial diaspora occurred when the Israelites of the Kingdom of Israel were sent into exile by the Assyrians during the 8th century BC. 2 centuries later, a similar fate befell the Israelites of the Kingdom of Judah, who were deported to Babylon during the expulsion of the kingdom of Judah in the 6th century BC. It was during this period that the term Jew, derived from the Book of Esther, began to be used. Number 5. Sargon II of Assyria and Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon, perpetrators of the early diaspora. The Assyrian ruler Sargon II played a pivotal role in the initial episode of the Jewish diaspora. In 722 BC, the kingdom of Israel fell under the dominion of the Assyrians, led by Sargon II. A considerable number of Israelites were subsequently expelled to Mesopotamia. Around 586 BC, the Chaldean king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar II, brought about the demise of the kingdom of Judah. He captured Jerusalem, razed Solomon's temple, and deported the Jewish population during a period known as the Babylonian captivity. Following the conquest of Babylon by Cyrus the Great, the Persian monarch, the Jewish people were permitted to return to Jerusalem, where they constructed the Second Temple. This marked the beginning of a phase during which their religious and cultural identity became stronger and more distinct. Number 6. In Babylon, Jews continued to practice their religion outside the traditional temple. In Babylon, Jews continued practicing their religion outside the traditional temple. The Israelite kingdoms emerged during the latter part of the Iron Age, consisting of Israel and Judah. The Bible mentions them as the successors of an earlier united kingdom of Israel, whose existence is debated among historians. The kingdom of Israel, the more prosperous of the two, was destroyed around 720 BC by the Neo-Assyrian Empire. The kingdom of Judah, with its capital in Jerusalem, became a vassal state of the Assyrians after the fall of the kingdom of Israel. It entered a period of decline until the conquest by Nebuchadnezzar II. During this time, elite Jews and many common people were deported to Babylon, where religious practices developed outside the traditional temple. Number 7. The Persian dominion over the Jews ended with Alexander the Great. The Persian dominion over the Jews came to an end with Alexander the Great. After the deportation to Babylon, this city became the center of Jewish life. Jews returned to Jerusalem around 538 BC and completed the Second Temple in 516 BC. It was during this Persian period that the Torah, the text encompassing Jewish law and identity, was written. The Pharisees and Sadducees began to take shape as religious movements. The Persian era concluded when Alexander the Great defeated the Persians in 332 BC. Alexander's founding of Alexandria turned it into a cultural hub for the region, leading to another Jewish diaspora to the Egyptian city. In Alexandria, Jews compiled the Septuagint, the oldest known Greek version of the Hebrew Bible. Number 8. Jesus of Nazareth was crucified for promoting a religion different from Judaism. Jesus of Nazareth was crucified for promoting a religion distinct from Judaism. Deteriorating relations between traditional Jews and Hellenized Jews, which had developed during the Seleucid kingdom of the Diadochi, Alexander the Great's successors, led to King Antiochus IV Epiphanes' prohibition of certain Jewish rituals and traditions. Some non-Hellenized Jews established the Hasmonean kingdom, which existed from 165 to 63 BC, until Pompey conquered Judea for Rome. Herod the Great was appointed king of the Jews, and his Herodian dynasty successors governed under various Roman figures. Between 30 and 33 CE, Jesus of Nazareth, a Jew who had introduced a new religious movement, was crucified in Jerusalem during Pontius Pilate's tenure as Roman prefect of Judea. The Jewish population subsequently rebelled against Roman rule, and Rome responded by destroying the Second Temple in 70 CE. Number 9. The expanding Christianity created tensions and violence with Judaism. Expanding Christianity generated tensions and violence with Judaism. Jewish relations with the Roman Empire remained strained. Constantine the Great initially allowed Jews to mourn their defeat and humiliation at the Western Wall once a year. Meanwhile, the growth of Christianity led to tensions with Judaism, as many new Christian converts were either former Jews or pagans. In 438 CE, the Empress Eudocia permitted Jews to pray on the Temple Mount, causing Christians to riot, resulting in their adversaries being expelled from Jerusalem. In the 6th century, the Byzantine Emperor Justinian I attempted to forcibly convert Anatolian Jews to Christianity, but with limited success. Number 10. The expansion of Islam altered conditions for Jewish culture. In 638 CE, Byzantium lost control of the Levant when the Islamic Arab Caliph Omar conquered Jerusalem, Syria, Mesopotamia, and Egypt. Islam introduced new social, economic, intellectual, and religious conditions for Jewish culture. However, Caliph Omar allowed Jews to re-establish their presence in Jerusalem. During this time, Jews worked as tanners, dyers, bankers, and coinassayers, conducting metal tests for purity. In the 7th century, new Muslim rulers in ancient Babylonia imposed a land tax, leading many Jews to migrate to cities like Baghdad. Number 11. They lived their golden age in future Spain during the Caliphate of Córdoba. They lived their golden age in future Spain during the Caliphate of Córdoba. The golden age of Jewish culture on the Iberian Peninsula, between the 8th and early 11th centuries, coincided with the Muslim rule over what are now the territories of Spain and Portugal. During this time of tolerance, Jews were accepted in society, and their economic, religious, and cultural life flourished. Under the Caliphate of Córdoba, they studied various sciences, participated in industry and trade, including the slave trade, and made significant contributions to philosophy, poetry, mathematics, medicine, geography, and botany. In Toledo, they translated Greek and Hebrew texts into Arabic and Arabic texts into Romance languages. This golden age came to an end with the invasion of Al-Andalus by the Almohads from North Africa, who were very intolerant of religious minorities. Number 12. During the Crusades, Jews paid with their lives for the death of Jesus. Sermons by Christian priests in church temples, seeking revenge for the death of Jesus, encouraged the Crusades. Thousands of Jews from France, Germany, and other European nations paid with their lives for the crucifixion of Jesus. As the Crusaders journeyed to the Holy Land, many Jews were forcibly converted to Christianity, and some chose to commit suicide to avoid baptism. Suicide prevented the killing of their children, who were often taken to be raised as Christians. These events are seen as the early stages of a sequence that would culminate in the massacres of Jews in the 20th century during the Third Reich. Number 13. Muslim Iberian kingdoms became increasingly intolerant. Muslim Iberian kingdoms became increasingly intolerant during the Middle Ages. Generally, Islamic rulers treated Jews better than Christians. However, in the 11th century, Jews began to face mistreatment on the Iberian Peninsula, such as the Córdoba pogrom in 1011 and the Granada pogrom in 1066. During the Middle Ages, Egypt, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen decreed the destruction of synagogues in cities like Baghdad, Marrakesh, and Sana'a. Jews who refused to convert to Islam faced the death penalty. In the Iberian Peninsula, the Almohads surpassed even the intolerant Almoravids by expelling Jews and Christians. The only options were conversion or death. Number 14. During the early Middle Ages, Jews in Europe lived better than most Christians. American historian James Carroll asserts that Jews represented 10% of the total population of the Roman Empire. According to this proportion, if other factors had not intervened, there would be 200 million Jews worldwide today instead of around 13 million. In Europe, there have been Jewish populations since very early times, especially in the area of the former Roman Empire. Before the Catholic Church was institutionally organized with an increasing set of rules, early medieval society was relatively tolerant. Between 800 and 1100 AD, approximately 1.5 million Jews lived in Christian Europe. Since they were not Christians, they were not subject to the feudal division into clergy, nobility, and serfs, which was an advantage for them. Number 15. They sustained the European economy when the Roman Church prohibited usury. During the late Middle Ages, European Jews were the primary, often sole, providers of financial services in areas of finance and administration. They were protected by their patrons, which included kings, nobles, and prelates. As the Roman Church strengthened and religious orders like the Franciscans and Dominicans emerged, representations of the Passion of Christ began depicting Jews as greedy murderers. In the early 14th century, persecutions and deportations of Jews became routine. The Church prohibited Christians from lending money at interest, and Jews filled the credit vacuum. While this religious measure threatened to undermine the financial system, Jewish involvement as financiers did not disturb the European elites, who appreciated the ability to extend credit without risking excommunication. This made Jews experts in the money trade. Number 16. Mass expulsions occurred toward the end of the Middle Ages. The Crusades, which included wars against the Jewish people, were followed by institutionalized deportations. For example, the Edict of Expulsion of the Jews in England in 1290, which remained in effect for the rest of the Middle Ages. In 1396, the Kingdom of France expelled 100,000 Jews, and several tens of thousands were deported from Austria in 1421. Many went to Poland, which was the most tolerant country for Jews during the Middle Ages. In Italy, they were allowed to live in a ghetto in Venice, a practice that later spread throughout Europe, often requiring Jews to identify themselves with a yellow star when outside the Jewish quarter. Number 17. Jews regard their persecutions in Spain during the 14th and 15th centuries as their worst catastrophe in 2,000 years. The largest Jewish community in the world was in Spain by the late 14th century. Around 300,000 Jews were forced to choose between forced conversion to Catholicism or exile after the fall of the Muslim Kingdom of Granada in 1492. Another 100,000 Jews had to decide between the faith of Christ or banishment. Meanwhile, Torquemada introduced public burning at the stake for those secretly practicing the Jewish faith. These Spanish events are considered by Jews as their worst catastrophe in nearly 2,000 years, between the destruction of the Second Temple by the Romans in the 1st century and the systematic extermination by the Third Reich during World War II. Number 18. Portugal confiscated Jewish children to pressure the conversion of their parents. Many Spanish Jews moved to North Africa, where Muslims were much more tolerant than Christians in Spain. They also went to Poland and the Ottoman Empire, which was more accepting of Jews. The Greek city of Thessaloniki, which was part of the Ottoman Empire, became the first global Jewish community thanks to the influx from Spain. Nearly 100,000 Spanish Jews crossed the border to Portugal, only to endure a bitter experience a few years later when the Portuguese kingdom seized their minor children and forced them to choose between converting to Catholicism or going into exile without their children. Number 19. The Ottoman Empire provided a safe haven for Jews throughout most of its existence. During the classical Ottoman period, approximately between the 14th and 16th centuries, Jews prospered in trade, finance, and administration. Joseph Nasi even became the governor of the island of Naxos, a position typically reserved for Muslims. Jews had lived in Anatolia for over 2,400 years, although their initial prosperity during the Hellenistic period faded during the Christian Byzantine era. Their fortunes improved after the fall of Constantinople to the Muslims. Throughout much of the Ottoman Empire, Turkey provided a secure refuge for persecuted Jews from other regions. It continues to have a small Jewish population. Number 20. Judaism also had its age of enlightenment. Around the 1770s, an intellectual movement called the Jewish Enlightenment emerged within Central and Eastern European Judaism, with some influence in Western Europe. This project sought a cultural renewal within Judaism by promoting the adoption of host country customs while maintaining markers of identity, such as the use of Hebrew. The movement promoted rationalism, liberalism, and freedom of thought and was perceived as the Jewish variant of the Western Enlightenment. It had a presence in the intellectual world for over a century, until the early 1880s when Jewish nationalism emerged. Number 21. A new type of resentment against the Jewish people arose in 19th century Europe. Although Jewish persecution did not disappear in the 19th century, tolerance toward Judaism spread throughout Europe. Napoleon invited Jews to leave their ghettos and live normal lives in cities within the French Empire under lenient Napoleonic law on religious matters. In 1871, Germany eliminated legal discrimination and granted equal rights to Jews. Russia remained the only European country with restrictions to remove. Number 22. The new form of resentment against the Jewish people led Jews to believe that they would only be safe within their own community. The trial of the French Jewish captain Alfred Dreyfus during the last decade of the 19th century, which motivated the famous J'accuse Manifesto by Émile Zola, was one of the first notable episodes where the emerging form of Jewish discrimination became evident. Such persecutions, combined with pogroms sponsored by the Tsarist Empire against Russian Jews at the end of the 19th century, led to the conviction of several figures in Judaism that their people would only be secure within the borders of their own nation. During this period, there was a significant migration of Jews to the United States. More than 2 million Jews found refuge under Uncle Sam between 1890 and 1924, the majority originating from Eastern Europe and Russia. Argentina and Uruguay also welcomed substantial groups of Jewish immigrants. Number 23. The Zionist movement held its first World Congress in 1897. The Zionist movement, whose goal was to fight for an independent Jewish state, held its first World Congress in 1897, and Theodor Herzl emerged as the leader of the Zionist movement. Following the First World War, the conditions for the establishment of a Jewish state seemed to be in place. The United Kingdom had taken control of Palestine from the extinct Ottoman Empire after the war, and made promises to the Jews regarding a national home. In the early 1920s, a massive wave of Jewish immigration to Palestine began, leading to growing hostility between Jews and Arabs as they cohabited in the region. Number 24. The greatest atrocity against the Jews occurred during World War II. The greatest historical atrocity against the Jews occurred during World War II. The conflict caused the United Kingdom to backtrack on its promise of a Jewish state. After the outbreak of World War II, a systematic extermination of Jews based on racism, known as the Holocaust, was carried out by Adolf Hitler's regime in Germany. The massive scale of these atrocities and their horror, revealed after the war, deeply moved global public opinion and strengthened the determination of the Jewish people to establish their own state. Number 25. In 1947, the United Nations proposed the partition of Palestine between Arabs and Jews. After the war, Jewish leadership decided to promote massive Jewish immigration to Palestine, including war refugees, without the authorization of the United Kingdom, which held a mandate in the region. In November 1947, the United Nations adopted a resolution recommending the partition of Palestine into a Jewish state and an Arab state, with a special international regime for the city of Jerusalem. Jewish leadership accepted the United Nations decision, but the Arabs rejected it. Number 26. The State of Israel was proclaimed in 1948. The Arab-Israeli War erupted in 1948, with a Jewish victory. On May 14, 1948, the State of Israel was proclaimed, with David Ben-Gurion as Prime Minister and Chaim Weizmann as President. Since its foundation, the State of Israel has been involved in a series of ongoing conflicts, including major events like the Suez Crisis in 1956, the Six-Day War in 1967, the Yom Kippur War in 1973, and wars in Lebanon in 1982 and 2006. Number 27. There are as many Jews in the United States as in Israel. Israel currently has a population of nearly 9 million, with 75% being Jewish. It is governed by a parliamentary democracy. While there are controversies about the figures, the Jewish community in the United States is significantly larger, with over 6 million people. There are also significant Jewish communities in countries such as France, Canada, Russia, the United Kingdom, Argentina, Germany, Australia, Brazil, Ukraine, and Hungary. Number 28. They are so rich. There are multiple reasons that explain why Jews are so affluent. First, they are one of the most highly educated people in the world, with 87% of American Jews having a university degree, compared to 40% of non-Jews. Right from the beginning, Jews rejected the notion that economic poverty was a virtue, contrasting with other religious traditions that consider privations as spiritually respectable or even desirable. During the Middle Ages, while the Christian world viewed charging interest on a loan, usury, with horror, essentially equating it to putting a price on money, Jews became the most skilled and better prepared financiers in the world, even though they earned the moniker of usurers. Number 29. They are natural entrepreneurs. Jews are natural entrepreneurs driven by the pursuit of food security for the State of Israel. Israelites have developed remarkable agriculture in the desert to ensure sustenance. In the past, European Jews were prohibited from owning land and living away from rural areas. Consequently, they had to make their living in cities, often in trade and finance, which proved to be more lucrative than agriculture. Jews have a deeply ingrained notion that they should be entrepreneurs rather than employees. An Israeli entrepreneur was called Margalid, meaning a person without money looking for opportunities. A nation of immigrants is a nation of entrepreneurs. Jews live frugally, and spending less enables them to save for entrepreneurial endeavors. Number 30. Jews of the Jewish faith are richer than those of other religions in the United States. 44% of American Jews live in households with annual incomes exceeding $100,000, while only 16% are in households with incomes below $30,000. This makes them the religious group with the highest economic status in the United States. They are followed by Hindus, 36% of whom earn over $100,000 per year. Other religious groups include Episcopalians, 35%, American Presbyterians, 32%, and atheists, 30%. Catholics rank 16th out of 26 religious groups, with 19% earning over $100,000 and 36% earning below $30,000. Jehovah's Witnesses have the lowest income, with only 4% earning over $100,000 annually and 48% earning below $30,000. Number 31. Fragment of a Jewish papyrus from 700 BC mentioning Jerusalem. A fragment of a Jewish papyrus from around 700 BC that mentions Jerusalem. In 2016, the Israel Antiquities Authority presented a rare two-line text written in ancient Hebrew on a papyrus dating back to the 7th century BC. It mentions Jerusalem by name. The text reads, "From the king's maidservant, from Naharat, jars of wine, to Jerusalem." This papyrus, along with the Hebrew Bible, is the oldest source that mentions Jerusalem in Hebrew from that time period, known as the First Temple period. Jerusalem was the capital of the Kingdom of Judah during this time, and Naharat, the other mentioned place, appears in the book of Joshua. The miraculously preserved fragment was confiscated from an antiquities theft gang that obtained it from a cave in the Judean desert. It was presented at the annual archaeology conference at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. The history of the Jews is still very much alive, and the Middle East remains one of the world's most contentious regions due to the ancient rivalry between Jews and Arabs. We hope this video has been helpful. If you have something to add, please share it with us in the comments section. Like this video and send the link to your family and friends so they can also learn more about the 31 things about the true origin of the Jews and their history. If you're new to our channel, don't forget to subscribe. Remember, a people who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it.